When we sit down, it's time for the conversation. Welcome back to Metropole Debrief. This is the debut episode of season 4, and we're looking into the revenue allocation debate, why it is very divisive. Are we likely to see a formula in the near future, and why it matters to you who are watching at home? Let me introduce my guest. The first one is Wanjiru Gikonyo. She is the National Coordinator for the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA. TISA was launched in Nairobi in 2008 to promote citizen empowerment and participation and government accountability at a moment of promise when Kenya was charting a new path to constitutional reforms and the formation of a multi-party democracy. TISA seeks to enhance and advance the Constitution's central tenet, transforming the way power in Kenya is distributed and managed, chiefly through the devolution of government powers down from the national to county level. Our second guest is Gabriel Muthuma. He is policy and governance expert. Wanjiru, thank you for making time. Let me begin with you. The third generation formula. 2 months into the 2020-2021 financial year, we are yet to have a formula that will be used to disburse 316.5 billion to the counties. Would you say the stalemate is politically motivated? Very briefly.
I'd say that yes and no. Of course, it's political because devolution is political.
Yes.
We are transferring power, decision-making power over resources from national to county government. And we do this through a twin process of which we are stalled at the second level. The twin process is the division of revenue, where the revenue raised by the national government, which is raised on behalf of the governments.
Yeah.
At the point where this money is shared between the national and the county government, we now get to the second stage where the money counties between. It is because no county wants to go back to its constituents and say we lost money. And you have counties that are of the money that they have to deliver services. And as we know, devolution is underfunded. So there is an actual shortfall, and this is a problem that must be dealt with. The other aspect that comes into play is that there is a new formula, and it's a 5-year formula. And so counties are, senators are correctly reading. If I accept to lose now, I'm losing for 5 years.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it is political, but it is founded on some very genuine concerns. And the bigger question is wrong with our devolution process. So I don't believe I think the formula is a good formula, but I think the politics around the implementation of devolution is what has led us into this point. And I believe is squarely, not solely, but is the funding decisions made by the national government are at the heart of the problem that is bedeviling the Senate at this time.
The third generation formula, if you watch the Senate proceedings, has been branded as a formula that pits winners against losers. It's supposed to further marginalize counties and kind of propel to success thriving counties. From where you sit, how do you see it?
Now, we have a more sophisticated formula. And the beauty with this formula is, one, it's paying attention to service delivery. Because at the end of the day, the primary mandate of county governments could be said to be service delivery. Of course, political representation is a very important one, and citizen voice, but service delivery is a primary mandate. So this formula is now beginning to ask, what are the service delivery needs in Kiambu, for instance, in Marsabit, in Wajir? What are the service delivery needs? What does it cost to deliver health services to each and every Kenyan? So that is a good thing. The formula also pays attention to what it's calling equitable development. So it still has a redistribution factor where it recognizes there are parts of this country that have had investments, whereas others have not, and where infrastructure is much poorer and weak, developed and better built up. So a good section of the formula is redistributing resources towards those counties. And then the last set of criteria are governance criteria that are focusing on ability to raise revenue and
Yes.
are focusing on fiscal compliance. These are also, so no, the formula is fine. And politicians will always seek to manipulate the public opinion. But the truth of the matter is we do not have enough money going to counties, and that is the crux of the issue.
Gabriel, let me bring you into the conversation. Thank you actually for making time and being here. There are counties that are set to gain revenue. Nairobi, for example, is set to gain about 1.2 billion shillings. Contextualize for the viewer, what does this kind of revenue gain mean for these counties?
Well, first of all, we've been treated to a lot of drama that today Kenyans don't even understand whether they stand to gain or lose when you're talking about the revenue allocation bill. But there's something I think we need to be reminded of. First of all, is that we envisioned counties, first of all, to have an element of economics, in that as much as we are going to get money from the national government, counties should think of ways of generating on-source revenue. Now, this is something that has actually gone, it's more like we've forgotten about it, because the true genius of why counties should exist is so that they can find an economic platform. And the national government comes in to ensure that they are able to bridge that deficit.
I don't agree with what Gabriel is saying, but that is because the problem is in the lack of county powers. The last problem we have, of course, is one of accountability. The reason counties weren't given borrowing powers is the fear that they would do what national government has done. National government has gone and borrowed a lot of money, ran the country into debt, financed unviable projects, financed politically selected projects, stolen, almost 40% of the money that has been borrowed, continues to steal. So because of lack of trust and a very poor governance culture, we muzzled counties. So I put it to you, the problem is not devolution. The problem is not the formula. The problem is our failed governance. And devolution cannot cure the fact that our political leaders are not accountable and do not obey the Constitution. So Senate needs to fight the good fight. They need to get more money to counties, but this discussion has to go back into beyond what BBI pretends to say we're going to give 40%. Counties need to be able to borrow. Counties need to get a guaranteed amount that's no less than 30%. Because if you look at South Africa, the local government level gets maybe around 27%. The provincial level gets another, about 60% of resources are between these two levels.
Okay.
But health services are extremely expensive to run. And the bulk of health, a big part of this is being run by the counties. So yes, counties need at least 40%, and they need a constitutionally agreed amount, but they also need powers to borrow.
Wanjiru, let me just interrupt you a little bit. You've mentioned the basic fundamentals of why we are seeing that gap, and you've done a good job in telling us where the gap is and how it can be filled. But now we have a formula that, if parsed the way it is, there are counties that will lose revenue and counties that will gain revenue. There are counties who might lose half of their budget. What's going to be the fate of these counties?
Ondiro, I think we need to remember, and I think I agree with Senator Kindiki, because he was the one directing the discussion to the source of the problem.
Yes.
The source of the problem is the division of revenue. So when the Council of Governors made a political decision this year, because last year they went to court, they fought a fight, the president said, we have no money, pesa zitatoka wapi, 1 trillion is going to repay debts. This is the heart of the problem. So we need to reopen that conversation. We need to say, hold on a minute. It's not about the equitable share.
Yeah.
It is about the total share. Let us reopen the division of revenue conversation. Let us have a dialogue. I believe national government has violated, not even I believe, it's evidence, has violated public finance management constitutional safeguards in the way it has handled debt. It's unfortunate, even with the COVID outbreak, you are seeing the Jubilee administration continuing to pronounce new infrastructure development projects. If you look at the UK, these are industrialized countries. Look at South Africa. South Africa only only borrowed to finance its COVID about a month ago because it had reserves in that they managed the economy, effectively. They managed their money effectively. Unlike Kenya, the moment COVID hit, we were borrowing because we were already broke. Despite that, we are borrowing, we are asking for debt relief, and we are starting new infrastructure projects. Look at the UK, look at SA. They are talking about essential expenditure and non-essential. New infrastructure development projects are non-essential. You have to put money in the COVID response. You have, and counties are key to the COVID response and recovery. So we are actually, the Senate is a small indicator of a very large problem. And I really wish the Senate would explode the problem and say, look, guys, let us sit down as a country and talk about our finance.
There are new parameters that have been introduced in the formula. For example, there's health, there's urban services, roads. What purpose will they serve in the development of the counties?
Very important, because it helps us get into a more sophisticated formula that allows us to quantify the, in essence, that money will enable us to ensure doctors are paid, nurses are paid, to ensure that if Nairobi County has so many, health staff of that many, this many agricultural workers out there, this many livestock farmers, that much needed for water, it will ensure that the money goes towards those services, or at least the amount available enables counties to meet their basic recurrent needs so that they can keep services running while counties look for money to do development from their own source revenue and from borrowing. So I support the formula because it gives us the ability now to begin talking about sharing revenue in service delivery terms. It still has, like I said before, a redistribution factor. And most importantly, it brings in a fiscal responsibility factor, which is extremely important. Now, the only tragedy, and I think one of the other gaps in the present scenario, is that counties like Nairobi that have performed extremely badly in terms of own source revenue, in terms of even management of its resources, because Nairobi is at the bottom. The CRA has looked at fiscal compliance, and Nairobi is at the bottom of that. It is then very tragic that Nairobi wins a lot in terms of its service delivery needs. So in my view, the fiscal parameters should be higher. The requirements for fiscal compliance should be higher than the 2%. It's actually coming to a total of 4%. It should be higher so that counties are incentivized to raise their own revenue. But like I said, the bigger issue is urban development. That is how we'll get out of this population question. Because it is unfair to say that because we have devolution and we do have historical marginalization, highly populated counties therefore are not entitled to a fair share of the basic revenue. The way to turn that question is to say we must look after historically marginalized counties, but we must look at highly populated, built-up areas from an urban governance point of view. And so the distortion in the formula is because of the lack of paying attention to the urban factor. The urban factor can be dealt with in two ways.
Okay.
CRA had proposed doing an urban development fund, an urban development infrastructure fund, which I think is very viable. It would require national government to give up the money that it is holding, because national government is holding at least 100 billion. It's probably more, but conservative estimates in 2015, national government is still holding 100 billion that belongs to counties. This money could go towards urban infrastructure development.
Okay.
This is building of water, sewage kind of systems and all of that. And this money could be transferred conditionally or unconditionally to the counties for that purpose. That would reduce the pressure in terms of the population. The second, like I said, is that we need to activate the urban governance structure. And this, if you look at the development of devolution, even in South Africa, it takes time. And we can say we had a transition period. We've had another 5 years to consolidate. Now it's time for us to step up and begin operationalizing devolution fully, because we can't remain. You might think we were in kindergarten at transition. Primary school is where we've been. Now we are moving to secondary. So we need a sophisticated formula, but we also need sophisticated laws. We need to grow. And that's where Senate should be taking us. Unfortunately, Senate
You've mentioned
Unfortunately, Ondiro, the argument in Senate remains at almost kindergarten level. They are refusing to say, let us step up and ask, what does devolution need? Because the devolution needs are growing, they are not receding.
Yeah. You've mentioned a very pertinent point that as much as we focus on urban development, they're marginalized counties. How do we ensure that as we are trying to settle the population factor, we are also settling the marginalization factor? Very briefly.
Marginalization factor is dealt with in the equitable. There is a equal development component of the shareable revenue formula. One, it's there. There's also the equalization grant. And this in itself is a bit of a challenge because the equalization grant is also undercapitalized. So I would say more money to the equalization grant, and we need an urban development fund. So as we are saying, counties need a minimum of 40% that needs to come from what the national government is squandering away, because some of it is being squandered. These are the areas that need attention, but it must be quantified. We don't want to say that because, a certain county didn't get money for all these years, it will now get carte blanche. Let us keep these. I like the formula because it gives us a focus.
Short term, where do we go from here? Revenue has to be disbursed one way or the other because we're 2 months into the 2020-2021 financial year. And then what is the long-term solution? Because settling for a not so good formula for everyone for 5 years is such a long time.
I think the formula isn't the problem. The problem is the maths behind the formula, and those are political decisions. So short term, like I said, bite the bullet. I think, I'm not a legal expert, the legal advisors would tell us. We had a court ruling that possibly allows a share of the revenue to counties to be disbursed as this deliberation goes on. The same ruling also says that if the sharing formulas aren't approved by the national parliament, that a citizen can then move to dissolve parliament. So there are those two possibilities. We need a political settlement, and Senate, I think, needs to, one, accept the formula, two, take the discussion back to the national government to safeguard the county so that no county loses. I agree, no county should lose. That money needs to come out of the non-essential expenditure. So Senate needs to open up a conversation around non-essential expenditure because national government is spending money that it shouldn't be spending. That money should be going to counties to safeguard COVID. So Senate needs to take its fight to the national government. Is it going to do so? That is the question. We can't tell. And we I think for us as civil society, we're going to watch this. And if they're not able to resolve this, we'll use court as an option and maybe push for their dissolution. And maybe they send them all home and we can start again and have the conversation about the real issues that matter. Put another way, I think this crisis presents an opportunity. It shows us that it's time for us to step up our conversation on devolution.
Okay.
By asking these fundamental questions about our urban areas, about counties' powers to borrow, about capitalizing the equalization grant, about looking at the national interest, because national interest is being used by national government to hold on to 87% of the expenditure, while countries are only getting, they're getting 83% versus 17%. This amount is untenable, and that's the crux of the issue.
Wanjiru, what a way to put it. We'll leave it there and wait to see if Senate will take the fight to the national government as Kithure Kindiki had proposed. Thank you for making time.
Thank you. All the best.
Okay, that marks the end of part 2 of our conversation, but keep it here. We come back with Social Watch.